In the bitter winter of early 1940, as the North Sea churned beneath gray skies, a quiet crisis unfolded within the Royal Navy, one few outside of naval intelligence ever fully understood. Britain was still reeling from the shock of rapid German advances, and the Admiralty relied heavily on the submarine flotillas stationed at Rosyth to gather intelligence, disrupt U-boat movements, and hold the thin maritime line between survival and collapse. Amid these high-stakes patrols, several British submarines slipped beneath the waves and never resurfaced, vanishing without distress signals, without survivors, and without answers. Their disappearances created an unease that rippled from operations rooms to the highest levels of naval command. The North Sea was, in many ways, the most treacherous hunting ground in Europe. Heavily mined by both the British and Germans, it had become an underwater labyrinth of unseen hazards. Crews of the 2nd Submarine Flotilla, many of them young officers straight from Gosport's submarine school, trained relentlessly to navigate these waters. But training could only do so much. The harsh reality was that submariners faced dangers on every patrol: mechanical failures, shifting minefields, prowling Luftwaffe aircraft, and the relentless presence of German destroyers. As one engineering officer later wrote in his diary, each patrol felt like balancing on the edge of a knife. One wrong turn, one bad calculation, and the sea would claim the boat whole. The disappearance of the first submarine in this chain of mysteries occurred in the spring of 1940. At first, naval intelligence attributed it to a mine strike, a tragic but common fate in the early war years. But then a second submarine vanished under similarly uncertain circumstances. And then a third. The losses came so quickly that some officers privately wondered if the flotilla's routes or patrol orders were being predicted by the enemy. There was no evidence of espionage, but the pattern was unsettling, and the Admiralty initiated a quiet internal review into the planning and coordination of submarine operations. Strategically, the British were under increasing pressure. German naval commanders had begun tightening their defensive rings around occupied ports, laying new minefields with greater precision, and coordinating closely with Luftwaffe reconnaissance squadrons. For British submarines, this meant that even traditional safe lanes were no longer reliable. At Rosyth, briefing officers pored over aerial photos and intercepted reports, attempting to piece together where the Germans had shifted their underwater defenses. Yet, despite their efforts, the losses continued. The sea seemed to swallow the boats without leaving a trace. A revealing note from a 1940 Admiralty intelligence summary captures the uncertainty of the moment. Enemy activity in northern approaches remains consistent, but suggests adaptation. U-boat patrol lines appear tighter. Increased aerial reconnaissance indicates efforts to detect submerged movement. It was a cautious statement, but to those reading between the lines, one thing was clear: the Germans were learning, and rapidly. As investigations deepened, the theories multiplied. Some officers insisted that drifting, uncharted mines, loosed from their moorings by storms, were to blame. Others argued for the growing accuracy of German naval patrols. There were even whispers that a new type of magnetic mine, capable of triggering beneath passing hulls, had been deployed. What made the disappearances particularly troubling, however, was the absence of radio contact. British submarines were trained to send at least a brief message if they were forced to surface or were being pursued, yet none of the missing boats managed even a single distress call. Their silence was total. Modern historians often point to these early losses as evidence of just how perilous the underwater battlefield had become. Patrick Mahomes, a naval archivist, once summarized the issue. The North Sea in 1940 was perhaps the deadliest place a submariner to be. Mines, aircraft, destroyers, even the weather, any one of them could destroy a submarine, and in many cases, no one would ever know which factor delivered the fatal blow. It is a sobering truth that underscores the enormous burden placed on these crews, who operated in isolation, fully aware that if disaster struck, recovery would be unlikely. Yet, despite the risks, patrols continued. Submarine crews were driven not only by duty, but by an unspoken understanding. Uncertainty was part of the job. They navigated through the cold, dark waters using sound alone, trusting their instruments, their training, and perhaps a bit of luck. The vanished submarines became a quiet shadow over each mission, unspoken but always present. Every departure from Rosyth carried the weight of those missing patrols.
By the end of 1940, with the pattern of disappearances still unresolved, the Admiralty faced a grim reality. There were too many unanswered questions, too many missing submarines, and too few clues. As winter set in once again, commanders prepared for another year of dangerous patrols, unsure which submarine might be the next to vanish without a trace.
As the war intensified, these questions grew more urgent. Another disappearance, this time in the far north near Norway, would soon force the Admiralty to reconsider every assumption about Axis defenses, leading directly to the mysteries surrounding HMS Tigris and HMS Regulus. By mid-1941, the northern waters around occupied Norway had become one of the most contested and dangerous regions for British submarine operations. The German occupation had transformed the Norwegian coastline into a fortified corridor lined with airfields, radar stations, and naval bases, supporting U-boats traveling to and from the North Atlantic. Into this tightening noose sailed HMS Tigris, one of the Royal Navy's most aggressive and dependable T-class submarines. Her patrols that summer were intended not only to intercept German shipping, but to probe shifting Axis defenses. What Tigris and her crew witnessed would foreshadow one of the war's most troubling submarine disappearances, the loss of HMS Regulus in the Mediterranean. Tigris, under the command of Lieutenant Commander George Simpson, had already built a reputation for daring hunts and surgical precision. The submarine, operating out of the 2nd Submarine Flotilla, frequently patrolled the steep fjords and narrow channels stretching from Bergen to Trondheim, waters the Kriegsmarine considered vital to reinforcing operations on the Eastern Front. But by 1941, German defensive tactics had changed. Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft, particularly Heinkel HE-115 floatplanes, flew increasingly frequent anti-submarine sweeps. More troubling, intelligence reports suggested the Germans had begun laying new mine barrages deeper and farther offshore than ever before. A patrol report from Tigris, dated 16 June 1941, noted, "Enemy aircraft activity unusually high, sonar contact intermittent, possible movement of minesweepers in area." Simpson, an experienced commander, interpreted this as an early sign of a coordinated defensive expansion. He ordered deeper dives, slower speeds, and longer submerged transits, indications that something about the northern patrol zone had become unpredictably dangerous. His instincts proved correct. Days later, Tigris narrowly avoided a sudden detonation near the entrance to Vestfjorden. The submarine's crew believed it to be a drifting mine, but post-war German records later revealed that a fresh series of magnetic mines had been laid by mine layer Skagerrak only 48 hours earlier. The significance of these observations reached the Admiralty quickly. If German defenses were shifting without pattern, British submarines could no longer rely on previously safe routes. But the crisis brewing in the Mediterranean soon overshadowed even these concerns. In September 1941, HMS Regulus, a sister vessel operating under the 1st Submarine Flotilla, disappeared without a trace in the Strait of Otranto, a narrow and heavily defended channel between Italy and German-held Albania. Regulus had been assigned to monitor Axis convoys supplying North African forces, a mission requiring precision and stealth. She never sent a final signal. Regulus, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Frederick Stanbury, departed Malta on 23 September. Her orders were explicit: take up station in Otranto Strait, identify Axis convoy routes, and avoid unnecessary engagement. The minefields there were known to be dense, but their exact layout was uncertain, particularly after Italian forces reinforced them following the British attacks on Taranto and the loss of Crete. Yet it was not the minefields alone that concerned the Admiralty.
Recent reports indicated that German E-boats and Italian anti-submarine units had begun conducting coordinated night sweeps using hydrophones and fast-moving attack craft capable of outpacing submerged submarines.
Within a week of Regulus's disappearance, conflicting reports emerged. Italian naval documents referenced a contact on 28 September involving torpedo boat Calliope, which claimed to have depth-charged a suspected enemy submarine. But the position was far from Regulus's assigned patrol sector. German records, on the other hand, included a brief entry noting a submarine sighting near Cape Linguetta that same week, but without confirmation of destruction.
With no wreckage, no survivors, and no clear pattern among the claims, the Admiralty was left with a mosaic of possibilities, none of which fit perfectly.
One of the most compelling clues surfaced decades later. A post-war Italian minefield chart, discovered during archival restoration in the 1980s, revealed that a previously undocumented string of contact mines had been laid just days before Regulus arrived in her patrol zone.
These mines had been placed farther west than British intelligence believed possible. If accurate, it meant Regulus could have struck a mine while maneuvering at periscope depth, leaving no trace and no time for distress signals.
But even this theory contained gaps. Why did no Axis forces report hearing such a detonation? Why was no oil slick recorded by aircraft patrols? And why did Regulus, a seasoned unit with a cautious commander, pass so close to a newly laid defensive line? The connection between the northern and Mediterranean disappearances troubled British analysts. Tigris's observations of rapidly shifting minefields and enhanced enemy detection methods mirrored concerns raised by Regulus's loss. It suggested that Axis forces were not merely reacting to British movements, they were anticipating them. Yet without concrete evidence, the Admiralty could only speculate. Today, the mystery of HMS Regulus remains unresolved. No confirmed wreck has ever been found, and while historians generally attribute her disappearance to an Italian minefield, the lack of physical proof leaves room for doubt. The silent vanishing of Regulus, combined with the increasing dangers observed by Tigris in Norway, marked a turning point in the undersea war. It forced the Royal Navy to reconsider strategy, reassess intelligence, and confront a troubling reality. Enemy defenses were evolving faster than anticipated. As 1942 approached, the Admiralty found itself facing a new and unsettling puzzle, one that would reach far beyond the Mediterranean and Norwegian coastlines. To understand the rising submarine losses, Britain would need answers hidden deep within Axis communications, and the most critical clues would soon come from Bletchley Park itself. By 1942, Britain's submarine campaign faced an unprecedented intelligence dilemma. Losses in both the North Sea and the Mediterranean had grown too patterned, too synchronized to ignore. Submarines were vanishing in ways that defied old assumptions. Boats that should have been safe were disappearing without distress signals, and enemy reports failed to align with the Admiralty's expectations. The sense of mounting unease drew the attention of Bletchley Park, where codebreakers had spent the war painstakingly unraveling the Enigma cipher. What they found that year would force naval commanders to confront a troubling possibility. The Kriegsmarine was adapting its defenses faster than Britain could predict, and gaps in intelligence were widening beneath the surface. The first signs emerged from a series of ultra-intercepts in February 1942. Analysts working in Hut 8 noticed irregular pauses in wireless activity from German naval units stationed along the North Sea and Norwegian coastline. These gaps were unusual, not long enough to indicate routine radio silence, yet too coordinated to dismiss. Alan Turing himself commented on the anomaly in a margin note, writing, "Odd pattern, suggests unconventional fleet movement." At the time, no one linked the observation to submarine losses, yet within weeks, Admiralty records showed two British submarines, HMS P-38 near Tripoli and HMS Tempest in the Ionian Sea, had disappeared in rapid succession. Even more intriguing was the shift in German minefield deployment strategy. The Kriegsmarine's Minenschiffe, mine layer vessels, began operating under stricter radio discipline, reporting less frequently and often transmitting only after completing a lay. This change, detected through decoded messages, caused fresh concern among Royal Navy planners. If British intelligence no longer reliably tracked minefield expansion, submarines were essentially navigating blind. Lieutenant Commander Alastair Mars, himself a decorated submariner, later remarked, "It felt as if the sea floor moved beneath us. What was safe on Tuesday might kill you on Thursday." Bletchley Park deepened its analysis. Working alongside the naval section, codebreakers cross-referenced decrypted Enigma messages with U-boat movement logs and Luftwaffe maritime patrol data. That was when the pattern sharpened. The Germans were predicting British patrol zones with unnerving accuracy. One decrypted exchange between Küstenbefehlshaber, Coastal Command, units mentioned high likelihood of enemy undersea craft near Sector M3 by 18 April. Mines adjusted accordingly. This message, dated the day before HMS Regent failed to return from patrol in the Adriatic, raised the alarm. Had Axis forces deciphered British patrol habits, or were they interpreting Allied activity through reconnaissance and hydrophone networks with new precision? At the Admiralty's submarine tracking room, Commander Roger Wynne faced the growing evidence with grim resolve. His team mapped every submarine loss since 1940, overlaying enemy minefields, patrol zones, and ultra-intelligence. The result was startling. The missing boats, including Seahorse, Tarpon, Swordfish, and Regulus, clustered around areas where German defenses had been altered mere days before their arrival. As Wynne later wrote, "Chance does not cluster. When losses point to a circle, someone has drawn it." But proving this hypothesis remained frustratingly elusive. Human testimonies added texture to the analysis. Survivors of HMS Perseus, one of the few submarines lost to a mine with a surviving witness, described the unnerving speed at which the vessel went down after striking a contact mine. John Capes, the submariner who miraculously escaped, recounted hearing no aircraft, no ships, just a sharp metallic crack before the hull gave way. His experience reinforced the fear that mines, not enemy surface attacks, were responsible for many disappearances. Yet some Admiralty officials resisted the conclusion. They believed air patrols or improved sonar detection remained equally plausible. Then came the Luftwaffe reconnaissance files. Newly decrypted in June 1942, they revealed increasing coordination between German coastal aircraft and naval minesweeping units. Heinkel Hay 111s and Dornier Do 18s were tasked with plotting changing currents and debris patterns, information used to redeploy mines with better precision. This collaboration meant the Germans could rapidly adapt minefields based on predicted British movements, creating hidden traps in formerly safe zones. The intelligence gap widened further when Bletchley Park intercepted a message referencing the deployment of Neue Magnetenminen, new magnetic mines, sensitive enough to trigger from greater distances. These mines could detonate beneath a submarine's keel without direct contact, leaving minimal evidence on the surface. Their introduction offered a chilling explanation for why British submarines seemed to vanish silently, often without any enemy report of an engagement. But perhaps the most unsettling revelation was that some German minefields had been adjusted in ways completely absent from British hydrographic charts. The Kriegsmarine had begun laying phantom barriers, segments deliberately omitted from transmitted records to confuse Allied intelligence. If a submarine wandered into one of these undocumented mine belts, its fate would be sealed without any chance of discovery. For the Admiralty, the implications were profound. The Royal Navy had underestimated both the scale and sophistication of Axis defensive evolution. Submarines were not being hunted one by one. They were being predicted, cornered, and cut off by a shifting landscape of mines, aircraft patrols, and acoustic detection stations. The losses were not random misfortune. They were symptoms of a war beneath the surface that Britain struggled to map. Yet, despite these insights, many questions remained unanswered. Why had certain minefield changes left no paper trail? How had Axis forces achieved such rapid deployment cycles? And most importantly, how many more submarines were at risk? As Britain prepared for intensified operations in the Mediterranean and Aegean, another submarine, HMS Trooper, would soon enter waters where minefields, enemy patrols, and shifting alliances converged into one of the conflict's most enduring mysteries. By late 1943, as the Mediterranean warfront shifted rapidly following Italy's surrender in September, the Aegean Sea became a chaos of competing forces, contested islands, and hastily laid minefields. Into this unstable region sailed HMS Trooper, a veteran T-class submarine with an experienced crew and a dependable record. The critical planning phase illuminated the vectors between Beirut, Dodecanese, and Rhodes. The operation was now live on the map.
It was a mission that required precision, nerve, and no small amount of luck. Within days, Trooper would vanish without a trace, becoming one of the Royal Navy's most enduring wartime mysteries.
The context surrounding Trooper's final patrol was uniquely dangerous. After Italy's surrender, British forces sought to secure key Aegean islands, Kos, Leros, and Samos, to prevent the Germans from dominating sea lanes linking the Balkans, Crete, and the eastern Mediterranean. But the Germans reacted immediately, deploying a powerful mix of air and naval forces under General Müller's command on Rhodes. The Luftwaffe's Stuka units from Kampfgeschwader 77 dominated the skies, while German Schnellboote, E-boats, and small anti-submarine craft patrolled the waters relentlessly. It was into this environment that Trooper, under the command of Lieutenant John Stanley Wraith, departed Beirut on 26 September 1943. Trooper's orders were simple: reach the Dodecanese undetected, observe German naval traffic, and attack targets of opportunity. But the seas she entered were anything but predictable. In the weeks before her arrival, Axis mine layers had sown new barriers around Rhodes, Leros, and the straits between the Cyclades Islands. Many of these minefields were laid hurriedly, without precise German documentation, as coastal units attempted to respond to shifting British and Italian positions. This made intelligence patchy, and Allied charts outdated almost instantly. Evidence suggests Trooper successfully reached her patrol zone. German records later confirmed several submarine alerts between 3 and 7 October, including a reported periscope sighting off the coast of Nisyros. One entry from a German anti-submarine group noted, "Unidentified submarine activity west of Kos. Patrols intensified." Though never formally confirmed as Trooper, the timing and location align closely with her operational orders. But then the trail goes silent. On 17 October 1943, Trooper was due to signal that she had reached her patrol position. No report arrived. The silence on the radio was absolute. Only the relentless, slow march of the second hand confirmed that critical time was still passing. At first, commanders assumed she was maintaining strict radio discipline in a highly sensitive area, but by 22 October, concern turned to fear. Trooper's fuel reserves and mission timeline left no room for extended radio silence. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. Theories emerged, none conclusive. Emerging from the darkness, the silent hull made its final, fatal contact with the mine. For a fraction of a second, the resulting detonation lit the eternal gloom. However, this minefield lay outside Trooper's known patrol area, unless she had diverted to avoid German aircraft or was maneuvering in response to convoy intelligence. From a high angle, the explosive aftermath of German E-boat S-55 depth charges erupts across the choppy Aegean Sea surface. The position falls within Trooper's extended patrol radius,
But the German crews never recovered debris or oil, leading historians to question if the target had been a submarine at all.
Mechanical failure also remains possible. Trooper, like all T-class submarines, had known issues with internal flooding and battery explosions. A sudden malfunction could have sent her to the seabed before a distress signal could be sent. Yet Trooper had undergone refit months earlier, and her engineering crew was regarded as meticulous.
Local oral histories from Greek fishermen add a poignant layer to the mystery. Some accounts describe hearing a deep, distant explosion during the second week of October, followed by large patches of surface oil drifting between Leros and Kalymnos. No Allied unit reported such observations. Without official documentation, the story hovers between rumor and potential clue.
One of the most intriguing developments occurred decades later. In the early 2000s, Greek divers located a submarine hull in deep water south of Leros. The structure was heavily damaged, partially embedded in silt, and showed signs of an explosive shock consistent with a mine. Yet visibility was poor, and no serial markings could be positively identified. Some researchers believe the wreck could be Trooper. Others argue it may be an Italian submarine lost earlier in the war. Without definitive verification, the site remains a debated lead rather than a solved mystery. Trooper's disappearance hit the submarine service hard. She was experienced, well-led, and operating in a region where British forces were desperate for reliable intelligence.
Her loss meant more than the tragic end of her crew. It symbolized how unpredictable, fragmented, and deadly the Aegean became after Italy's collapse. The Admiralty eventually declared her lost to enemy action, most likely a mine.
Yet the absence of hard evidence left lingering doubts within naval circles. As post-war records emerged, the questions only deepened.
Why did Trooper leave no debris trail, oil slick, or surfacing attempt? Why did no German or Italian unit confidently claim her?
And if she did strike a mine, which of the hurriedly laid, poorly mapped fields claimed her? The mystery of Trooper would linger long after 1943.
But she was not alone. Even as the war neared its end, other submarines would remain unaccounted for, leaving behind not just unanswered questions, but a legacy of silence beneath the waves that persisted well into the post-war era. And as Allied investigators sifted through captured German archives, they discovered that several wartime minefield maps were missing entirely, raising the unsettling possibility that some vanished submarines, including Trooper, lay in locations never meant to be revealed. When the war finally ended in 1945, the guns quieted, but the questions did not. For the Royal Navy's submarine service, victory in Europe brought not closure, but an urgent search for answers. Families waited for news of vessels that had never returned. Admiralty officers combed through seized German documents, hoping that somewhere within the captured archives lay the key to understanding the fate of the silent patrols, Seahorse, Swordfish, Regulus, Trooper, and others whose decks never again touched sunlight. Yet even as new information surfaced, it quickly became clear that some submarines had vanished into a fog of incomplete records, hurry minefield deployments, and lost wartime reports. The sea had swallowed not only the boats, but also the evidence. The first major revelations came from the Kriegsmarine's Naval High Command files. In the chaotic final months of the war, German officers attempted to burn sensitive records, especially those dealing with minefield operations. Still, fragments survived. Some confirmed earlier suspicions: undocumented mine belts, rapidly deployed magnetic mines, and entire strings of contact mines laid without formal charting. A telling entry from Admiral Rolf Karls's wartime log noted, "Mine warfare must be silent and unseen. Certain deployments need no written record." This single line underscored what British investigators feared most. Some minefields had been intentionally omitted, making post-war reconstruction nearly impossible. In the immediate post-war years, joint British and Allied teams began systematic surveys of suspected wreck locations. The results were mixed. The wrecks of several lost submarines, HMS Tarpon, HMS Pandora, HMS Regent, were eventually found, confirming the destructive power of mines or depth charge attacks. But others proved more elusive. HMS Regulus, despite extensive research in the Strait of Otranto, left no trace, not a hull fragment, not a recorded explosion, not a single confirmed sighting. For investigators accustomed to cross-referencing enemy logs, survivor accounts, and hydrographic data, this level of silence was unusual. Some experts began to believe Regulus may lie far from her assigned patrol area, caught by an uncharted mine line or forced off course by mechanical failure. The case of HMS Trooper remained equally unresolved. German archives offered only indirect clues, mentions of underwater detonations, vague submarine sightings, and hurriedly laid mine belts around Rhodes and Leros. None of these could be conclusively tied to Trooper. Even decades later, when deepwater sonar and submersible technology improved dramatically, no officially verified wreck site emerged. Expeditions sponsored by Greek and British maritime historians uncovered potential leads: a submarine-shaped structure in deep sediment south of Leros, a sonar echo northwest of Carpathos, scattered metallic debris near a known World War II minefield. But none of these could be definitively linked to Trooper. Without serial numbers, torpedo tube configurations, or intact hull plates, each find remained a possibility, never a conclusion. Amid these mysteries, a new challenge emerged: reconciling the gaps left by Bletchley Park's own wartime intelligence. Many ultra-decrypts, while invaluable at the time, were fragmentary. They revealed patterns, hints, and tactical shifts, but not complete pictures. Analysts revisiting the decrypts found references to temporary barriers, restricted records, and ghost belts, terms suggesting the Germans had deliberately used incomplete communications to confuse Allied codebreakers. If the British could not fully decode minefield patterns during the war, reconstructing them afterward became even more difficult. Modern naval historians also highlight a critical factor often overlooked in wartime analysis: natural forces. Strong currents, sediment shifts, underwater landslides, and seismic activity have altered seabeds across the Mediterranean and North Sea. A submarine lost in 1941 could be hundreds of meters from its original resting place by 1991. Some vessels may be buried in silt, broken by underwater pressure, or hidden beneath landslide debris. This reality complicates every search effort. Even with modern sonar, a wreck buried under layers of sand or rock may be effectively invisible. Yet the persistence of these mysteries continues to draw researchers. In recent years, advances in autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, and improved sonar resolution have allowed new expeditions to revisit old search zones. AUVs deployed in the Heligoland Bight located a previously unknown wreck consistent with an S-class submarine, leading some to believe it may be HMS Swordfish or possibly HMS Seahorse. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, high-resolution imaging off the coast of southern Italy revealed several World War II-era wrecks long misidentified on naval charts. These discoveries renew hope that the missing British submarines may one day be found. But beyond the technical puzzles lies the human dimension. Each vanished submarine carried dozens of sailors, men whose families often received only a brief telegram. Missing, presumed lost. No location, no explanation, no remains. In naval tradition, submariners lost at sea are remembered as being still on patrol, a phrase that carries both reverence and sorrow. Their absence forms an unbroken thread through Royal Navy history, a reminder of the silent risks beneath the waves. For the Admiralty, the unanswered questions carry a deeper lesson.
The submarine war in WWII was fought not only with torpedoes and sonar, but with intelligence, deception, and rapid technological change. Minefields shifted faster than charts could track.
Enemy patrols adapted with precision, and the ocean itself became a dynamic battlefield where silence often meant danger. The missing submarines illustrate how complexity, secrecy, and the unpredictability of the sea can create mysteries that endure long after the war ends. Even today, as researchers continue to explore the depths, several British submarines from World War II remain unlocated. Their final moments, whether sudden, violent, mechanical, or simply silent, remain known only to the waters that claimed them. Their stories remind us that some chapters of history end not with answers, but with the enduring weight of uncertainty. And so, the vanished British submarine patrols of World War II remain more than just lost vessels. They are unsolved echoes of a conflict fought in darkness, intelligence gaps, and shifting tides, leaving behind questions that may never be fully resolved beneath the waves.